Welcome to the Stop Doing Stupid Stuff podcast. In this episode, Tim Keefe, CEO of SDSS Global Ltd, and Andreas Wieman, CXO of Transform-CX, unpack findings from a new study featured in Entrepreneur.com that explored whether AI actually improves productivity. The research, conducted at Boston Consulting Group, tracked 758 consultants using AI for different types of tasks. The result? Those who relied heavily on AI without questioning its output performed worse than their peers. Tim and Andreas dive into why this matters, how corporate culture shapes AI use, and what leaders should do now. Let's get started.
Hey everybody, welcome to another enticing, exciting, super intelligent conversation with Tim Keefe and I on the Stop Doing Stupid Stuff podcast. So Tim,
Do we have guests today? Because you said super intelligent. I was just trying to figure out who that was going to be.
yeah, that was my self-identification of super intelligent. That excludes you. So,
Okay,
uh,
I'll just be quiet. No. Thanks for that. And so today, actually, really interesting article I want to talk about, or we want to talk about, which is just was published by Liz Brody on June 3rd, and this is an Entrepreneur magazine. And the title of it, and we'll have it linked in the comment section, is "Does AI actually increase productivity?" And this is an Ivy League research, came to some surprising conclusions. Now, again, like with everything that we talk about with regard to AI, I think we would say a lot of it depends. But in this particular case, it was a cool article. They talked about applying AI in two different scenarios. One was more of a general research, which was, brainstorming new ideas for shoes. And the second idea was actually using AI to evaluate interviews and make a recommendation using quantitative data. So let's jump into it. So, Mr. Andreas, sir.
yeah, so they took 758 BCG, Boston Consulting Group employees, into the two groups that Tim just said, and I think it was pretty interesting. So I don't know, like, course correct me here, Tim, since we don't script these out. So just for our listeners, I may say something that Tim is like, I don't want to talk about that yet. That's what happens when you have an authentic, podcast here. But I think maybe we start with the results, but kind of preface that and say, this is a topic that Tim and I have been talking about for well over a year. If you go back and listen to some of our older podcasts, and we kind of have this hypothesis of, and I think what's proven where we've applied it so far, look at AI as ways to augment the humans, the people, whether it's, students, whether it's professionals in business, whether it's sales, whether it's, doctors, et cetera. It doesn't
Mhm.
matter. The field's irrelevant. But look for ways to augment it, not to always jump to the replacement of humans. That's where I think there's a lot of fear. So that's why adoption isn't big. There's hesitation. We're not going to learn on how to scale AI if there's so many different varied interactions from it, whether it's fear, angst, anxiety, over reliance, etc. And that's kind of what's cool about this study is that it kind of showed two ends of a spectrum, and then you got to think about everything that's in between that spectrum. That's the really interesting part to me. So the results overall, I'm going to paraphrase here since I just gave that like long soliloquy there. So the people that didn't rely heavily on AI usage actually were faster and more accurate in the quality outcomes of their work. The folks that had an over reliance on it and didn't double check it actually took a little bit longer, and the quality of work was less on the outcome. So I think they kind of, from a synopsis standpoint, Tim, would love to get your thoughts on this part of it. The two groups, so the group that over relied on it, they kind of said, all right, well, let's prompt, let's see what it produces. And the accuracy of what it produced was lower, and that's what impacted
Right.
the quality of the outcomes there. But if you think about it and step back, these are like competent professionals. Why didn't they question what they were seeing? Did they think that, oh, this AI is so smart that it supersedes my own real life experience? Maybe I've been wrong, and they have an existential, question of their reality or something. But it
Well,
seems like they didn't question it in the pilot groups. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
well, we see it all the time, in just real life. People look at this and it looks good, right? Like that's the scary part. It would be great if it came with like an alert from the AI saying, "I made this up. What do you think?" but it doesn't, right? It all looks the same. And we've seen two very, very public situations where lawyers who should know better and are getting paid a whole ton of money by the hour submitted briefs that were done by an AI that had made up case law. I mean, that's really bad. And you would think, how hard would that have been to have a paralegal, check the case law references? But they didn't, because it was just too easy to say, oh, that looks really good, let it go. In fact, really interesting at the end of the article, it says, and I'll just read this real quickly because I do think it's pertinent. We already know that AI is good at helping us brainstorm, and it's not great at making critical judgments about complex information, which aligns with the results of this study. The lesson here is be careful. Although generative AI significantly improves productivity for tasks it's good at, it can throw you off for things it's not. And again, not to read everything here, but I think that's the summary point, right? It is a
Yep.
tool. And I use this analogy a lot. Maybe it's not a good one, but it's like a really sharp sushi knife. And if you know what you're doing, you can make an amazing meal. If you don't know what you're doing, you're going to cut off a finger. And, I think that's how you have to kind of look at this, which is, do I know how to use it? And I think a lot of us don't. Right. And I'll put myself in that category. I can always get better at doing better prompting, better defining that digital conversation that I want to have with that AI to get to a more accurate answer. And most importantly, particularly when we talk about companies deploying this, a consistent, accurate answer, because it's got to be the same, right? Like if you're pricing something for a customer, you've got to quote the right price. You can't make it up. If you're quoting a terms and conditions, it's got to be the accurate and correct one. And companies have gotten themselves in trouble with this. There's a kind of famous one with Qantas. I don't think it was Gen AI. I think it was conditional logic IVR, but they ended up giving a price for a ticket that was like $6 that should have been 600. And they went to court, and the judge said, yep, that AI or that IVR was acting as an employee, and therefore you're responsible for what they give out. So again, I think like you would, just like you would with humans, right? You want to do quality assurance, you want to check. People get tired, people get lazy. I think AIs are demonstrating that they may not get tired, but there's a certain amount of laziness there, or they're subject to the language model that they're using.
Being applied to and trained on. I think
Exactly.
that's kind of the key. Like if you think about, and we're talking more large scale usage with AI here, but if you think about the workers, right, that are exposed to that, they've been told for the past decade, don't deviate from this, deviate from the process. Just go to your knowledge management system, go to your business process system and follow these rules, follow the standard operating procedure, the SOP, just trust it. And so we've conditioned all of these people, these humans, individuals, to say, don't use your brain, just here's the checklist, follow the checklist, trust the checklist. That's the Zen moment there. Follow the checklist. We're right. The system is right. When in reality, most of us know, and most of us listening are like, no, it's junk. It's complete unhygienic junk. And
Oh,
so, are
yes.
there morsels of validity in there? Yeah, there is, but it's the AI is being trained on that model. And so you're training it on and maybe junk's probably more of a abrasive adjective use, but fill in the blank with whatever makes you feel a little bit less, abrasive, I guess. But we train that AI model on that model, on that, let's call it SOP, that probably isn't hygienically cleansed enough to the standards of accurate machine learning models and incorporation to produce generative AI
Yeah.
responses, right?
Yep.
And so now you have someone saying in a worker who's like, oh, nope, I've been told don't question it. It's spitting it out. Don't question it. Just go with it. And now even in this BCG model, you have people that are, consultants, right? So they're not just kind of singularly focused on one job function like a lot of workers are. They're multifaceted consultants, and they're still following the same logic. I think that's a problem that we need to figure out culturally. How do we step back and say, be human, question it, be curious about it, not in a nefarious way where it's like you fold your arms and you're like, oh, no, I'm not trusting anything that comes out. That's taking an absolutist view and you're jumping from one end of the spectrum to the other. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is just be human and question it, be inquisitive about it, and say, that doesn't sound right. Let me ask it another question and let me say, this doesn't sound right. Like quite literally, type out, this doesn't sound right in your chat GPT. What about this? And see what kind of response you get back. Have fun with it. Treat it like it's almost like a person and ask it questions. Be inquisitive with the AI and see what kind of responses it produces back and kind of go from there.
I completely agree with you. And of course, people are lazy, right? We want to get to the answer so that we can move on to the next thing that we have in front of us. So I think what you're getting at is, really important, is that it's a tool that we need to be conscious about how we use the tool. We need to be conscious to quality check what we're getting out of it, even if that means that and we've done that ourselves internally. You run it through another, you've got another agent there to actually, maybe screen out the most obvious incorrects, right? Like, oh, that's not a valid case, case reference that you put in there. So that calls into question all the references in the document, for example. But again, I think you're right. It's and we've got to, and I don't think there's like a lot. I see some, right? But I'm not seeing a lot of like what I would call good progressive prompt learning for people. It's either here's 50 different prompt models that you can use, which is overwhelming to people, or it's nothing and people are just asking the generic question, which could be, design a skyscraper for me, period. Oh, okay. Well, that leaves out a lot, right? It leaves a lot to the AI to fill in the blanks versus somebody that's a much more specific prompt, which might be, what are the specific steel that I need to use in a high rise or a skyscraper of this size in this location with this ground, blah, blah, blah. So therefore, I'm framing the question in a much more specific way to get to a more specific answer. But you have to know how to do that. And I think this is where a lot of people are falling short. And I put myself in that category. So how do I get better at it? So let me
Yeah,
ask you that question. I mean, from a generic perspective, how do we tell our audience that what are ways to get better at doing this?
yeah. I'll say it like this, and I'm going to give it a kind of 30,000-foot view answer because our listeners are from all industries and levels of employment, et cetera. Think about it in a very simplistic way that you're having a conversation with someone that's an expert in the field in the question that you're asking and just have a conversation with it. Don't just try to, describe what you just said. Hey, how do I build a skyscraper? Start with something that's like, okay, how do I build a skyscraper that's in this state, in this city, in this, and what you're doing is you're giving the AI more information to condition its dependency on the outcome, the results it's going to produce within all of the data that it's researching once you hit enter from the prompt and the thinking. And I also encourage just a lot of AI inferences that have the like logic, I think is what it's called on most of them, that it shows the thinking process of it. I would highly encourage you guys turn that option on, and when you hit enter after your prompt, just try to quickly skim through what it's, quote unquote thinking about. It's really just processing, right? But it's really trying to not verbally articulate, but visually articulate, via uh, a
The
show of
steps.
language, the steps
Yeah,
of what it's doing to process. I think that kind of unlocks different aspects, cognitively speaking, to the user to say, oh, yeah, I didn't think about it like that. That's, and stop the prompt and then restart it or wait until it's done, produced, and then go back in and ask it another question in the same string. That's the other thing is ask it in the same string. So that way it's kind of confined to where you started within that string and you're not starting it over. But be curious about it and just pretend it's another person and it's kind of smart, but can also make stuff up, but kind of smart and just ask them questions and see what kind
yeah,
of responses you get back. And then A/B test that against, hey, what if I just ask it a very 30,000-foot prompt? What is it going to produce back? And then compare that and see what you get and kind of go from there as an individual in the area of competency that you have, in your experience and apply that to what it produces.
agreed. Agreed. I think those are really simple but very important approaches that you need to have for this. And again, I think we're also seeing clients. I mean, I recently saw some stuff submitted in an RFP that was clearly at GPT or another generative AI tool. And you're like, okay, so where is the quality of work here? And that's another risk, I think clients, particularly companies like consultants that, are selling their unique knowledge, they need to be really careful because this can blow up your reputation very, very quickly.
Well, it's I equate it to being an author on a book that was completely ghost written, right? When the people are going to say, "Hey, let's talk about this," when you get to the next step in that phase, it's all going to fall apart, and that's where the credentialization that you just mentioned, that's where it comes undone. Like you still have to know and understand what it's producing and be able to talk to it. Otherwise, you're kind of lying, and that's I don't know. I mean, that's it's out there in the ether. I'm not one to promote that, but
Well, let's
um,
call it a possible misrepresentation of reality. But you're right, and I think
very
that that's the
eloquently
risk.
put.
As a consultant would. All right. All right. Well,
Well,
I think this is a really powerful conversation. Let's keep it going. If people have comments, etc. One thing I would recommend, if you're really interested in prompt engineering and the whole interface, the user interface for these AI tools, I would suggest following Roseanne Warner. If you're in LinkedIn, you'll see her in a lot of our stuff. She's got a lot to say in this space, and I think that you could learn a lot. I've learned a lot from her. So again, Roseanne Warner, and then our sponsor for today, who I didn't bring up earlier, I should bring it up, is PCS San Francisco. So I want to call out Dan Hernandez and his team, who are managed service providers in the Bay Area. If you're interested or need help on the IT side, whether it's email management or more importantly, cybersecurity, and you're worried about the impact of things like shadow AI, reach out to pcs-sanfrancisco.com and tell Dan that we referred you over to him. So with that, as always, Mr. Andreas, it's great to get some time with you and wish you a great start to your coming week. And thank you all for listening today.
yep. Thanks, Tim. Thanks, everybody.